stories in this video are based on anonymous online posts and are narrated and commented on for entertainment only. The original story is not my copyright, and all credit goes to the original author. A link to the original post can be found in the video description.
My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back isn't him.
Subscribe for more stories like this.
My brother Kevin has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately, and maybe being out in the world could help me get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout turned Eagle Scout turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia, where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking him if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to Trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and a signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or a video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities. We gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they would put a notice out to the ridge runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kev was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through, just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of communication with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long. Enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption like, "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't. It seemed to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheeks and jaw. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was real thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shorts looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he had smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom." That was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything. That happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower. But something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breath. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all, really, but all I got were grunts and aha says before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more of the same. Kev eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then it was stilted, awkward, unnatural. He's been home for almost a month now and something isn't right. His voice, it changed somehow. It's still his voice, but it's like there is a second voice buried underneath it, like someone is trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all of this, maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks, but after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away, and honestly, it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint, I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother, perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He widened his stance and thrashed his head towards the ground and out of my line of sight. I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure, so I ran out to check on him, and that when I saw it. His head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for at least a day or so. Its body bloated and its eyes were dull and hazy. Kevin reached inside the cat's body and started to strip off pieces of muscle and tendon, slurping them up the same way he had been eating our mother's cooking. Pressing his thumb into the thing's skull, he popped out one of its eyes and tossed it back like a grape. I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals, rabbits, mice, squirrels. I tried to run to my parents' room to wake them up to tell them that we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood. He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw and my dad rushed outside to try. And, well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police, and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong, though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him, and I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was killed my brother, and somehow his body came back home. My brother disappeared, but I am terrified he will come back. My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back isn't him. Update. My parents and the cops were still organizing search parties in the woods surrounding our house. Their working theory was that Kevin had some sort of underlying mental health issue that was made worse by the weeks of isolation on the trail. They also think that maybe he could have been given something or taken something while out there, and the chemical reaction of whatever drug caused some sort of psychosis. I couldn't bring myself to tell them that that thing wasn't my brother. All the comments on my last post made that pretty clear. I don't think I can say that I had accepted the fact he was gone at that point, but I knew whatever we found of him, if we found anything at all, would not be my brother. Well, we did find him. It happened last night. It was late, but my parents were still out with the police and sniffer dogs in the woods. I was told to stay home in case he came back while they were gone. I was sitting in the living room, keeping an eye on the side yard where the woods start to get thicker, when I heard this weird thunking sound. It was slow and paced evenly, like a metronome. Thunk, pause, thunk, pause, thunk. From my viewpoint in the living room, I could see a shadow cast across the dining room table. Backlit from the streetlights outside my parents' house is sort of a U-shape. You can walk a circle around the first floor, going from kitchen to dining room to living room and back again. I slipped off the couch and sort of crouch walked my way into the kitchen. From there, I had enough of a cover from the wall dividing the living room and dining room so that I could see the bay window that looked out across the front yard. There was my brother, or rather the thing pretending to be my brother. He was standing in front of the window, rocking back and forth on his heels. He walked too close and his forehead would clunk against the window, thunk, then he would step back almost like it had surprised him, pause, and then rock forward again, thunk. He looked awful. His skin was sallow and slick with sweat, which made no sense since it's November in New England. It hasn't been above 50 degrees in weeks. His lips were crusted over with blood, and I knew enough at that point to know it wasn't his. The worst thing, though, were his eyes. They were this sickly pale blue. The lenses looked cataract, and his pupils were dilated, unfocused points. My breath hitched in the back of my throat, and my heart felt like it was going to fall out of my stomach. I kept my eyes trained on him as I reached for my cell phone and tried to dial 911. The phone trilled and I waited for the operator to pick up. There was soft click and then 911. Do you need fire, police, or ambulance? I started to speak and then suddenly Kevin seemed to focus on me. Maybe he had heard my voice. His clouded eyes seemed to laser focus for a moment, training on me crouched behind the wall. I wasn't sure if he could see me. He shouldn't have been able to from his position, but the thunking became louder and more urgent. I gave the operator my name and address. Kevin began to bang into the window faster and faster. I tried to explain that my missing brother was back, but that something was wrong, that he was trying to do something. The crack of the window pane was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I watched as my brother slammed his head again and again into the glass. Blood smeared across his forehead and then the cracking turned to a smash. As my brother crashed through the pane, I screamed, I dropped my phone and I ran. The only room in my parents' house with a lock is the bathroom, so I scrambled to get there and lock the door. Once I was there, I could hear Kevin falling through the broken window and lumbering around the house. His feet sounded unnaturally heavy, like they were waterlogged. I could hear the crunching sound of broken glass under feet, and I looked around for something, anything I could use as a weapon. I just kept telling myself I would not go down without a fight. As quietly as I could, I took the cover off the back of the toilet tank. It was heavy and made of porcelain, and I figured that even if it didn't kill that thing, hopefully it would at least stun it enough to give me time to make a break for it. I could hear him outside the door, sniffing the air like a dog. I held my breath and readied myself. There was nothing for a few moments. No sounds of walking or sniffing. I waited a few more seconds before I knelt to the ground and peered under the gap in the door. My brother's dead eyes stared back at me. I screamed as the door began to bulge, as that thing shoved its shoulder into the frame. I grabbed the tank cover again, readied myself. That's when I heard the sirens. I could hear shouting from outside and the stomping of boots across the smashed glass. The thing wouldn't stop. It kept throwing itself against the door. I heard one of the cops yell, "Taser," and then a rapid clicking noise. There was more shouting, more clicking, and then one of them said, "Stop, or we will shoot." The thing outside the door paused for a moment, and then it charged at the officers. I could hear heavy feet lurch across the floor. That's when I heard the gunshots. This is where I sort of black out. From what the cops tell me, they were able to get me out of the bathroom. My parents were called back in from the woods and were told their son had been found trying to attack their daughter. They were told that he had been killed after he attempted to attack an officer. We're staying in a hotel now, close to the station. They are going to interview us all again in the morning. They plan on doing an autopsy on my brother. My parents haven't said a word to me since we got here. I think they blame me. I wasn't the one to shoot my brother, but I was the person who called the man who did.
Subscribe for more stories like this.